In this video, we are going to create a set of tests for the filter that uses the exist class. Okay, if we scroll down, let's start with a public function called filter does not return values with subquery replace. Basically, in other words, when we pass the third argument to the filter to the exist constructor. Okay, test, and we start with a filter equals new filter, and let's import this class. And for the arguments, we're going to start with the array of queries. We're only going to pass one. New exists, and again, it's not this one, exists. There we go, query exists. And here we're going to say we want the field books ID with the new pivot exists in, and we're going to pass book location for the table name, then book ID for select, location ID for where, and then books ID for where and then true for query replace, subquery replace. After this, so that's the only query that we're going to pass through. Then second argument is going to be the concatenator for the author statement, then new concat and is what we're going to use here. Import class. Obviously, by default, filter uses concat and, but I just want to make sure that within the test, I strictly declare it here as well. Okay, so we've got our filter ready. Now what we need to do is run this assert count, and we expect 0 when we run filter with filter methods, and we pass array of 1, then 2, and we get values. And then number of values with subquery replace is not 0. And what's happening here basically, when we're passing an array to the filter, as you may remember, we don't collect values. They are automatically added to the statement. So we're replacing the question mark with the actual values. In this case, the values array will return 0 because there won't be any items in it. Okay, so let's run this test. And if we run it, there we go, 5 tests, 10 assertions. So it's all working fine. Okay, next test. If we create a few new lines, public function filter returns correct number of values. And test. Now what we're going to do is basically copy what we have here, everything, but this time we are going to change the value that we're passing through to the filter. We are going to just pass number 1 here, and let's change our expectation here as well to 1, and then the message change to 1 as well. And what we're going to change here as well is remove this third argument to the exist constructor. If we save it and run a test again, and there we go, 6 tests, 11 assertions. Now obviously, because we're just passing the single value rather than array, these will be added to the values property, this array on the filter, and obviously when we count them we will get 1 item. Okay, next test. This time we are going to test for the correct value. So public function filter returns correct value. And we're going to start the same way as before. So let's just copy this filter, paste it in. We're not going to be passing the third argument to this exist. Concat and stays the same way as it is. And now we're going to run the assertion. This assert equals, and we expect array with the item 5, with the integer 5. When we run filter, and we pass the value 5 through as an argument, and then try to get values. That's what we should get, because obviously this values property This values method returns whatever the values property contains, and it's of the array type. That's why we need to obviously wrap it within the array. Semicolon, and the message we are going to put here in case this assertion fails, it's going to be incorrect values returned with argument 5. Okay, save it. Let's run the test. And there we go. 7 tests, 12 assertions, all of which are passing. The next test, public function filter produces correct statement with author end. And let's make it a test again. And we're going to start with our filter equals, and it's going to be a new filter. And this filter will take 2 arguments. First one is the array of queries, so new exists. And not this one. Let's go back. Exists. We're talking about the statement query exists. And this one will take books ID. Then we have new pivot exists equals. There we go. That's the one. And again, let's import this one as well. And for the pivot exists equals class, we add author book. Then we have book underscore ID. Then we have author ID and books ID. And we don't pass the third argument through. So by default, it's going to be false. And then for the filter, second argument is going to be a new concat end. And I know obviously filter takes concat end by default again, but I want to be strict here, make sure that obviously it's definitely this. If at any point we're going to decide and change it for any reason within the filter class, then I want to make sure that this still stays concat end. Okay, so this is filter equals. I'm going to copy this entire block, and this second block is going to be filter in. So we're going to have 2 different filters. Everything stays the same except that for the fact that we're going to add the third argument to the exist, and we set it to true. So basically, we want to replace values directly within a statement. Okay, so we have 2 filters. Now we're going to run filter method on both. Filter equals filter, and we pass a single value of 5. And then for filter in, we are going to run filter with the array of values 2, then 5. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to prepare our expectation. So SQL that I want to receive, what I want to get is going to be exists, and then brackets, semicolon at the end, and then on the new line, I'm just going to indent it a little bit, and exists, select book underscore ID from author book, where author ID equals question mark, and book ID equals books ID. So this is the statement that I'm expecting to get. And let's run this assertion. This assert equals this trim white space, our expectation, and then this trim white space, our filter equals with the statement and true, indicating that this is the first statement within the where clause, and the message in case it fails, incorrect statement with alter end, comma inner end, because obviously the third argument to this filter is for the inner end, and we can actually let's just duplicate this line to make sure that we definitely have this third one as well as concat end. And then end first statement. Okay, let's try and run it. And there we go. We have 8 tests, 13 assertions, all of which are passing. So that's great. Now we tested this filter equals with statement true to indicate it's the first statement. And this is what we should receive. This is what we're expecting to receive. We have this question mark here because filter equals does not replace values directly within the statement. As you can see, this third argument is only within the filter in, not for the filter equals. instance. Okay, so now let's work with this next one. I'm going to copy this entire statement and paste it right after this first assertion. And now this time I'm going to prepend end to this exists. Everything else will stay exactly the same. And I'm going to copy this assertion as well. Now assert equals will be without this this second argument, trim white space. Filter equals now statement without the true. In other words, the default value associated with the argument is going to be passed through, which is false. So it's not the first statement. So let's update this message and non-first statement. So now we should receive the statement with this prepended end to it. Okay, let's save it, run a test, and there we go. That works as well. Back to the editor. Now we are going, I'm going to copy this the last statement, paste it underneath. Now it's going to be exist, but rather than having this equal and question mark, it's going to be in and then 2 and 5. That's what we should get when we run. Again, let's copy this assert equals. This is our expectation now, and we run this. Rather than filter equals, it's going to be filter in statement with true as an argument, and now incorrect statement with outer end, inner end, and let's just put in here pivot exists in and first statement, just to distinguish between the assertions. These messages you can ignore as well, obviously, because when you when your test fails, it tells you as well which method it fails on. So you don't really need these messages, but I just tend to add them. I will probably later on stop adding them to those tests. Okay, so let's just run this test, and we have a failure. As you can see, it tells me exactly which method on which test fails. And then obviously adds this message right at the bottom, but it's not something that we really need here. Okay, failed asserting that two strings are equal, and the problem we have in here is exists, select book ID, author, book, where author, okay, we have equal here. And let's go back to the editor and scroll up a little bit. And yes, that makes sense because obviously we've used the wrong subquery. It's not pivot exists equals this time, it's pivot exists in what we want to use with this specific filter in instance. Okay, if we try and run this again, actually before we do this, we've added this third argument here. Let's do the same for this filter equals. So we have all three arguments for the filter here, just to make sure that we obviously definitely have this concat end. Okay, let's try the test now. And there we go, 8 tests, 15 assertions, all of which are passing. That's great. Okay, now another one that we're going to run is I'm going to copy the entire thing. So this expectation together with this assertion. Let's paste it under, and this time we're going to say end exists, and then everything else stays exactly the same. But the difference is going to be obviously when we now running this filter in statement is going to be set, the argument is going to set to false, indicating that this is not the first item within the where clause. So end non-first statement. If we save it, let's run the test, and there we go, 16 assertions with 8 tests, all of which are passing. So let's go back. So the next test, public function will be filter produces correct statement with author or test, and we start with the new filter equals as well. I'm just going to copy what we had in the previous one, just filter equals, let's paste it in. Now filter equals, I'm going to just use the one here, so I just rename it to filter. This time rather than concat end, it's going to be concat or. This end statement is going to be ignored here. Let's just concat, import this concat or. So if I now scroll up, you see this concat or has been added as well right here at the top. And I said this third argument is going to be ignored because this second argument is for the inner concatenation, which is only happening when we have more than one item, more than one query within this first argument. We only have one within this test, so this concat or is never going to be used. But let's keep it like this anyway. Okay, so now we're going for the filter, and we're going to pass value 5 here, and then we're going to go for our statement, which is going to start with SQL equals select, sorry, not select, it's going to be or exists, and then in between the brackets, new lines, then indentation, and we're going to go for select book ID from author book where author ID equals question mark, and then end book ID equals books ID. Okay, so that's our expectation, and then we run the assertion. So this assert equals, we start with this trim white space again, our expectation statement, and then this trim white space filter statement without the arguments, so it's not going to be the first item within the where clause, and then message incorrect statement with alter and, sorry, it's not alter and, it's alter or, which is the second argument, so with alter or and inner and. Okay, let's save it, let's run the test. There we go, 17 assertions, 9 tests, all passing, so that's great. Let's scroll up a little bit, and the next test, public function and filter produces correct statement with alter or and subquery replacement. Again, test, and we're going to start with the filter. Again, I'm going to copy what we have here together with the filter method and then the statement. So let's paste it in and let's modify it slightly. So here filter exists, pivot exists in this time we're going to use, and we keep the same arguments, and then the last thing we're going to add the third argument. We want to have the subquery replacement set to true, and let's keep the concat or the same way, and then concat and, even though it's going to be ignored, let's keep it here as well. Then we have filter, this time we are passing an array of items 2 and 5, because we want to replace them directly within a statement. So now rather than having this equals question mark, it's going to be in, and then 2 and 5 separated by comma, wrapped with a set of brackets, because we're using this exists in instance here. Okay, and obviously we set this third argument for this exists query class to true, because we want to replace it directly within a subquery. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is run our assertion. So this assert equals, and we go for this trim white space again, our expectation, then this trim white space, our filter, then statement without the argument, so default is going to be false, indicating that this is not the first item in where clause, so it's going, this or keyword is going to be prepended to it, obviously, and then the message incorrect statement with alter or and inner and using pivot exists in. Okay, let's save it, run the test, and there we go. All 10 tests and 18 assertions are passing, and that's everything within this exists test class. Let's just remove all these redundant spaces. All our tests for this exists class are now written. Obviously, if you may think of any other scenario, feel free to add more tests, but I think that's quite sufficient for what we need. Let's save it, close all these files, and move to the next video.